Thomas's old blue pickup truck turned onto the narrow road leading to the housing tract at the edge of town. The streetlights had just come on. It was September sometimes. The wind was crisp, sometimes harsh, carrying with it the scent of freshly cut grass from the neighbor's yard. The dashboard clock blinked 6:37. He shut off the engine and sat for a few seconds, his hands still gripping the steering wheel as if letting go might send everything spinning out of control. In the rearview mirror, his eyes were red from dust, from exhaustion, from too many sleepless nights. A half-finished lunchbox sat on the seat beside him. In the back, a few cardboard boxes rolled around, not yet returned to the warehouse. In the distance, a train groaned across the tracks, its horn wailing in a steady, unrelenting rhythm. The mailbox out front was stuffed. He pulled the contents out. An electric bill, a water bill, a card with the words, "Thinking of you, a month late," and a pizza flyer advertising, "Buy one, get one free Tuesdays only." He shoved them all into his jacket pocket. The grass in the front yard had grown taller than the neighborhood code allowed. Across the street, a neighbor watering his lawn raised a hand in casual greeting, calling out, "Good day at work," Thomas nodded, forced a polite smile, and quickly turned away. He wasn't ready for anyone to look into his eyes too long. The white door bore a hairline crack at its base, a lightning-shaped fracture running up like a warning. Thomas fished for his keys. Every evening, the moment he set the key into the lock, his heart sank. Beyond that door was emptiness. He drew a deep breath, turned the key, heard the faint click of the latch, and felt the soft spill of darkness drift outward across the threshold like mist. The living room was silent. Only the fridge hummed, and a yellow glow poured in from the kitchen. On the cupboard door hung a calendar slashed with red X's, each mark drawn by his own hand, beginning the day of the funeral, a month, then 2. Each cross, a record of a night survived, sometimes no more than endured. On the counter sat a plate of browning apple slices. The sink brimmed with dishes. A school lunch menu was pinned to the fridge Wednesday. Cheese pizza, green beans fruit. Next to it, a handwritten note from the teacher, "Emily needs more time. She's quiet, but she completes her work." Thomas had read that note 10 times. Emily sat curled in the corner of the sofa, clutching a worn teddy bear with one ear frayed. She wore a white t-shirt, gray sweatpants, and no socks, her bare feet pressed into the worn shag rug. Her hair was tied loosely to the side strands slipping over her cheek. Her eyes rested on the black screen of the TV, not watching, just placing her gaze there the way one puts a photo on a wall to fill a void. Thomas moved toward her, slowly unlaced his shoes, set them by the rug. "Did you eat anything yet?" he asked, his voice low, as if afraid of disturbing something fragile. Emily gave the faintest nod without turning. "I had a yogurt cup. I'll warm up some mac and cheese, okay?" He pulled out a box of pasta, set a pot on the stove, poured in milk. His hands moved by habit while his head stayed hollow. He threw in a pinch of salt, too much. The taste would be sharp, but who cared? He stirred, watching the noodles soften in the boiling water, thinking of all the things that had gone soft lately. Broken routines, fractured schedules, words that never made it to the end of a sentence. Emily rose when he set the food on the table. 2 plates, 2 spoons. One chair still left empty, a fixed landmark in the map of the house. One rainy night, he had thought of dragging that chair into storage to spare himself the sight. But halfway through, his hand on the backrest, he stopped. Some things, if you take them out of view, only turn into storms inside your head. "How was school today?" Thomas asked, trying for an even tone. He cut into his pasta, lifted a bite, then set it down again, realizing he'd forgotten the butter. "Fine," Emily said. One word, small as dust. Do you have homework I could sit with you if you want? No need. She stared at her plate, spooning apart each piece of pasta like she was sorting clouds. I finished it. Thomas nodded silently, rewriting her words in his mind. Don't need Dad, or don't need him beside me. He didn't want to tangle in the meaning. He only wanted to be close enough to catch her if she stumbled. After dinner, he washed the dishes. Warm water ran over smooth ceramic, tangible solid. Everything had shape, weight, texture. Everything except sorrow. Sorrow was steam rising as he ran the hot water clouding the kitchen mirror, clinging to skin, seeping into his shirt, impossible to shed. He turned off the tap, dried his hands, glanced at the landline phone in the corner. The message light blinked lazily. He pressed play. A friend's rough voice, "Hey, if you need a beer, call me." A woman's voice. "Our condolences. Thomas, we left a casserole on your porch, should last 3 meals." Then a mechanical one, credit card payment overdue. He shut it off. In the living room, Emily had curled up again with her bear, her gaze drifting somewhere unreachable. In a corner leaned his late wife's acoustic guitar, its strings slack. Some nights he thought of tuning it, playing the song she used to sing to draw Emily closer. But he couldn't remember the words. He sat, ran his fingers over the strings, their faint twang like droplets of water. Emily glanced over, then turned away. Some sounds only summon what was left unsaid. At 8 o'clock, he told her to get ready for bed. Emily went to brush her teeth. Thomas lingered by the hallway closet, its door ajar, the faint scent of soap clinging to neatly folded towels. He pulled open the top drawer, a small pink sweater embroidered with flowers bought by her mother on a late winter afternoon the year before. He closed his eyes, set it back. On the lower shelf, his wife's blue scarf lay coiled like bound wind. He drew it out, inhaled. The jasmine scent was faded, but faintly there, like a lost signal of memory. Emily's room was covered with crayon drawings, houses with red roofs, suns, wide lawns, a woman with long hair holding a little girl's hand. The newest drawing was only a blue sky and an empty space in the center framed in heavy pencil lines. Thomas stared at that emptiness as if looking into a map of his daughter's mind, a hollow where the wind whistled through, leaving the tiny figure trembling. "Want me to read a story?" he asked from the doorway. Emily slipped under the blanket, shook her head. "I don't want one tonight." Her voice was soft, polite, as if afraid to hurt him. "All right." He sat in the chair beside her bed, leaving the lamp off, letting only the hallway light spill in. "I'll just sit here for a while." Emily turned her face to the wall, clutched the bear. After a long time, her breath steadied. Thomas sat listening to that rhythm, like a sailor listening to waves, searching for a way back to shore. He remembered the funeral. A small church, dark wood beams, lilies with their sharp fragrance, the cold tang of incense. Emily sat dwarfed between 2 adults, her small hand gripping his until his fingers went numb. He remembered his wife's eyes in the hospital days before, not a farewell look, but a silent, insistent plea, keep her safe. He had nodded too quickly then, like signing a document unread. Now, every night, he reread the contract, stumbling at the hard lines. When Emily slept, he went back to the living room and turned on the floor lamp. Its amber light fell thin over objects. The armchair with old cat scratches, a shelf of borrowed parenting guides, a pile of unread tech magazines, a framed photo, a meadow on the town's edge where the 3 of them once spread a blanket for a summer picnic. In the photo, the sky arched impossibly high. His wife laughed, sweat-dark hair plastered to her neck. Emily younger then held a cookie aloft, grinning wide as if believing the sky might accept it and return something even greater. Thomas touched the glass, the ache sharp, but no longer stabbing. It was like an old bruise, press it, and it hurt, release it, and the memory lingered. He set the frame down, pulled pen and paper from the coffee table drawer, wrote a list for tomorrow. Milk, bread. Pay the electricity bill. Ask the teacher about parent night. Mow the lawn. He wrote, mow the lawn, erased it, then wrote it again. Each small task was a knot tethering the day ahead. His flip phone buzzed. A text from a coworker. Morning shift, packed. 6 a.m. at the warehouse. He typed back, okay. 2 letters, small as dust. But now life was made of dust pieced together grain by grain. He passed the back door, pulled the curtain aside. Outside lay the dark yard stretching into an open lot, a low ridge, a line of old oaks swaying their leaves, whispering in the wind. The sound seeped through the cracks like an indistinct invitation. He stood a long time watching the shifting shadows. It had been too long since he'd taken Emily out there. Since her mother's death, every time the wind rose, Emily shut the windows tight. She said the wind carried things away. He had once answered, the wind makes things cooler. She'd looked out silent as if proving that not everything cool was kind. Night deepened. Thomas switched off most lights, leaving a single glow on the bookshelf. He gathered scattered toys into a wicker basket. A second teddy bear, Emily's lesser one, lay on its back, staring at the ceiling. He propped it upright against the rim, instinctively arranging it to look less lonely. Then he walked toward the bedroom. Passing the doorway, he brushed his hand against the frame, a habit since the loss, like touching a railing to be sure the stairs still existed. In his room, he changed clothes and sat at the edge of the bed. His wedding ring still circled his finger. He twisted it once, feeling the cool metal. Sometimes he thought of removing it not to forget, but to spare it from scratches in the day's work, as though he might be marring the last intact thing. But he kept it. A circle, like a promise, like the horizon folding the town each night. He switched off the light. Darkness filled the room at once, dense but not suffocating. He lay down, listening to the house, the fridge hum, the tick of the wall clock, a car passing, the wind brushing the roof. He thought of tomorrow, of the short talk with the teacher, of what breakfast could be quick enough to still get Emily to school on time. Then came the thought that never made the list, how to open Emily's heart, without scaring, without pressing, without letting go. A door he himself stood outside of every night, asking whether he even had the key. Before sleep, he rose once more, padded to Emily's room. He cracked the door, peeked in. She slept, curled on her side, the teddy wedged in her arms, hair shadowing her cheek. Thomas leaned his forehead to the frame, whispering almost soundless, "I'm here." No one heard but the room. But he needed to hear it, like a man relearning words after a storm, each syllable a lesson. "I am here." He closed the door, returned to his bed, pulled the blanket over, letting darkness muffle the beat of his heart. Outside, the wind swept evenly across the open field. Maybe tomorrow he thought he would leave the window open, just a crack enough for the sound of wind to come in, not enough for anything to blow away. He closed his eyes, held on to that thought, like a thin thread. And the night moved on slow, patient, waiting for another morning to nudge the door a little wider. On Saturday morning, sunlight spilled through the window, laying a long stripe across the wooden floor. Thomas woke earlier than usual, not because of the alarm, but because of the sound of dry leaves rubbing together in the backyard. He stood at the window, pulling back the curtain, looking out at the dew-silvered grass. Something in that morning's wind brought back a time he thought had been swept away with dust roads and the weight of daily survival. In the garage, the air clung with the familiar mix of old gasoline and machine oil. Thomas had only meant to find a hammer to fix the back door hinge. But when he bent down to a corner shelf, his hand brushed against a light wooden frame thick with dust. He pulled it out, wiped it off, and a memory slammed into his chest. It was the frame of an old kite, the bamboo sticks worn but still intact. At his feet lay a spool of frayed twine. Thomas chuckled, a hoarse sound caught between surprise and wistfulness. He remembered it clearly that summer when he was 11. His father, a quiet man, had taken him out to a field on the town's edge, placing in his hands a blazing red kite. The wind was strong, the kite wobbled, and Thomas feared it would crash. But his father only stood behind him, a steady hand on his shoulder, saying one short line: "Just hold the string tight. The wind will do the rest." And like magic, after a few sharp tugs, the kite soared upward, tiny against the wide sky, yet making him feel as though he'd conquered something bigger than the world itself. The memories came rushing back like an old film reel, its colors faded, but its sounds intact. His father's laughter, the pounding of their feet on grass, the dry tang of summer weeds. It had been so long since Thomas let himself remember. The past few years had been filled with bills, shifts, hospital visits, then the funeral. But now in his hands, this fragile kite frame felt like a doorway cracked open to another time. He sat on the garage floor, turning the bamboo over in his hands. One corner was broken, likely from rough storage. Yet he knew, with careful mending, it could still fly. And suddenly, a thought flared in him, simple but resonant. Maybe the kite could help Emily. He closed his eyes, picturing his 8-year-old daughter laughing in a field, her small hands gripping the string, her eyes bright. But the vision dimmed, overtaken by reality. Emily sitting silent, clutching her bare eyes clouded with confusion, lips pressed shut as if holding back tears. Could an old game draw her out of the dark? Or would it only remind her of what she'd lost? Thomas rose, set the kite frame on the workbench. He grabbed a scrap of paper and sketched quickly, outlining the shape of a new kite. His fingers were strong, but trembling. He remembered the way his father had shown him to tie knots to find the angle of the wind. Those weren't just instructions for a toy, they were moments where father and son breathed in rhythm, learning to trust in something invisible, the wind. All morning he dug through old boxes, unearthing colored paper, a few strands of nylon cord, a bottle of glue. Simple materials, yet they felt like a test of fate. If he could piece this kite together, perhaps he could piece back what had fractured in his daughter's heart. As Thomas worked, the garage door creaked open. Emily peeked in, her dark hair falling over one shoulder, eyes still heavy with sleep. "What are you doing, Dad?" Her voice was small, like a whisper. He startled, then smiled. "I found this." He held up the kite frame. Sunlight from the doorway lit its fragile lines. Emily stepped closer, curiosity and hesitation mingling in her eyes. "What is it, a kite frame?" "When I was your age, I used to fly kites with Grandpa. They went so high it felt like touching the clouds." His voice slowed, carrying a spark of excitement he hadn't shown in a long time. Emily hesitated, then shook her head. "I've never flown a kite." The words tightened his chest. A child who had never felt the rush of running into the wind, gripping a string, watching something she controlled soar into the sky. Wasn't that like never believing in magic at all? And if there was one thing she needed after all she had lost, it was to know that magic still existed. "Want to try?" Thomas asked gently. Emily bit her lip. dropped her gaze. She shrugged, saying nothing. It wasn't yes, but it wasn't no. Thomas understood. He didn't press. That's okay. I'll build a new kite. Whenever you're ready, we'll take it to the field. He said it like a promise both to her and to himself. Emily gave a small nod, then slipped out, leaving the door open. Sunlight spilled into the garage, shining over the old frame. Thomas watched her retreating figure, a knot of ache and hope tightening in his chest. He turned back to the bench, working with renewed resolve. Each knot, each glued seam was more than construction. It was stitching back the invisible string that had slackened between father and daughter. He murmured as if speaking to himself. You won't fly alone, Emily. There will always be a string between us. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. And inside that small garage, a father began again, with an old memory, hoping that from a kite, a new future might rise for his little girl. Thomas sat at the wooden workbench in the garage, the fluorescent light overhead flickering in and out. In front of him lay the new kite frame, now skinned in sky blue paper, its edges neatly glued, the nylon line pulled taut. The smell of dried glue mixed with old wood and machine oil, turning the cramped space into a kind of time capsule that held the scents of years. He bent over to adjust the final knot, his sturdy fingers trembling just a little. From the living room, the wall clock ticked steadily, the metallic hands like a reminder of each minute he was trying to stitch back together. Emily sat on the sofa, clutching her familiar teddy, watching, but pretending to read a comic book. Whenever Thomas glanced up, she immediately lowered her head, feigning focus. When I was your age, I loved flying kites, Thomas said, trying to keep his tone easy. Grandpa made me a red one with a star on it. It flew so high I thought I could touch the moon. Emily didn't answer. Her lashes flickered. Her hands tightened around the bear. Thomas gave a small, awkward smile and kept tying as if talking to his own past. After a long while, he heard slow footsteps. Emily came closer to the garage door and leaned against the frame, her eyes hesitant. What if it flies away? She asked, voice so small it seemed afraid to crack the air. Thomas looked up, the light cutting across his face, a thin sheen of sweat on his brow. He paused, then said, It won't fly away, because this string holds it. Just like, I'll always keep you here close to me. Emily stayed quiet, her gaze darkening. She wanted to believe him, but another memory sounded inside her, her mother's hand slipping from hers, growing cold in the hospital room. There had been no string to hold her mother. Emily bit her lip, turned her face aside, hiding her eyes. Thomas saw but didn't know what else to say. He wanted to pull her into his arms but feared she would flinch. The space between them felt like a crack in glass. No one meant to make it, but it widened day by day unless someone found a way to mend it. That night, after Emily went to bed, Thomas sat alone in the garage, his fingers following the kite's edge. He remembered his promise to his wife. Take care of her. Don't let her lose her smile. But thinking of Emily's eyes that afternoon, he realized that smile had been gone longer than he had let himself admit. He bowed his head with a sigh, clumsy as an apprentice in the workshop of his own life. The next morning, with the sun still tangled in mist, Thomas busied himself with the kite again. He added a few pale pink ribbons, hoping his daughter would like them. When Emily woke, he called softly, I'm almost done. Want to give me a hand? She came over and looked at the kite. Her gaze lingered on the pink ribbons. For a moment, it brightened. Then she dropped her eyes and whispered, I don't know how. That's okay, Thomas said, smiling, handing her a small pair of scissors. Just cut a length of string. I'll show you. Emily hesitated, then took them. Her small hand trembled as she made the cut. The line came out a little crooked, but still usable. Thomas patted her shoulder gently. Perfect. It was only a small act, but to Thomas it was like a sliver of light slipping through a thick wall. A first step, fragile but important. That evening at dinner, Thomas tried to nudge the door open a bit more. Tomorrow, want to go out to the field with me, just a walk, and we can bring the kite to try? Emily looked up, uncertain. She wanted to say yes, but a surge of fear rose. If the kite fell, if it broke, would that prove that beautiful things always end? She swallowed and answered softly, "I'm not sure." "That's okay," Thomas said with calm warmth. "You don't have to decide now. I'll wait till you're ready." After dinner, Emily hid in her room. She sat at her desk, a blank notebook open. With a pencil, she drew a blue sky, a small pink kite tilting in the air. But the string connecting it to the ground was snapped. Her heart kicked at the sight. She tore the page out and tucked it into the desk, afraid that if Dad saw it, he would hurt. In the garage, Thomas sat alone looking at the kite on the table. He pictured tomorrow, wind rising, the kite lifting. He saw Emily laughing. But deep inside, he also knew the fine cracks were still there in his daughter's heart and in his own. A single kite wouldn't heal them. They would need more time, patience, a love that didn't quit. He lifted his head and looked through the small garage window. The moon hung there, dim and suspended like a gaze from far away. Thomas whispered, "I'm trying. Do you see outside?" The wind slipped through the trees. The rustle sounded like an answer, soothing yet indistinct. Thomas closed his eyes and told himself, "Tomorrow we'll try, even if it's just one small step." And in that house, two souls, a fumbling father and a wounded little girl, waited for a fragile string to be drawn tight, pulling them closer, bit by bit, inch by inch. Sunday morning sunlight slipped through the curtains, falling across the dining table, still cluttered with a glass of milk and crumbs of bread. Thomas had been up early, quietly folding the kite into an old cloth bag. He brewed coffee, took a sip, and watched his daughter struggling with her white sneakers. Emily was silent, her hair tied hastily with an elastic band, her eyes puffy from not enough sleep. "It's a beautiful day," Thomas said, his tone light, testing the waters. "The wind's just right. If you'd like, we could take the kite out to the field." Emily glanced up, a flicker of hesitation in her gaze. She bit her lip and looked toward the window. Blue sky, slow drifting clouds. Wind stirred the trees outside, spinning leaves before dropping them to the porch. The sight tightened her chest, everything flying away, leaving untethered. She gave the smallest nod, barely there, as if afraid to disappoint her father. Thomas hid his relief in a steady breath. He stood, slung the kite bag over his shoulder, and together they stepped out of the house. The town was quiet on a weekend morning. Some shops still closed, the faint aroma of coffee drifting from the corner cafe. Father and daughter walked down the cobblestone street, their footsteps mingling with the chatter of sparrows. Every so often, Thomas stole a glance, Emily's eyes downcast, nudging a pebble with the toe of her shoe. He wanted to speak, but feared breaking the fragile silence. As they neared the meadow outside town, the wind grew stronger. Wildflowers trembled, oak leaves whispered, and the air carried the damp scent of soil. Before them spread a wide, sunlit field, each blade of grass gleaming. In the distance, other families dotted the space, a young father tossing a ball to his son, a couple laying out a picnic blanket, children laughing freely. The liveliness made Emily shrink back, her small hand clutching the hem of her shirt. Thomas bent close, whispering, "It's all right. We'll find a spot just for us." He led her along a narrow dirt path until they reached a clearing where the wind swept unhindered. He opened the bag and pulled out the kite blue with pink trim. Running his hand along its edge, he checked the line, then held it out. "Do you want to try holding it?" Emily reached out, then pulled back. "What if it falls?" Thomas smiled gently. "Then we pick it up and try again. What matters is never letting go of the string. Holding the string means we still have it." She hesitated, then finally took the spool. Her small hand trembled against the rough cord. Thomas stepped back, raised the kite high, and waited for the wind. "Ready," he called. Emily nodded, her heart racing. Thomas released the kite, wind rushing through the paper, vibrating. She tugged the string, but within seconds the kite wavered and plummeted into the grass. She flinched, eyes wet. "I told you, it just falls." Thomas hurried over, brushing dirt from the kite. "That's all right. Try again." Flying a kite is like learning to ride a bike. You fall a few times before you find your balance. The second attempt ended the same, the kite lifting, then toppling. Laughter of other children rang from afar, and Emily's face burned red with shame. She dropped the string and turned away. "I can't. It'll never fly." Thomas set the kite down and crouched beside her. He looked into her teary eyes. "Emily, you know, when I was your age, I cried too when my kite fell. I thought I'd never get it right. But Grandpa told me something I've never forgotten. You don't need to make the wind obey. You just have to learn how to go with it." Emily lowered her head, whispering, "But the wind makes things go away." Mom went away too. The words pierced him. He hadn't expected her to voice it so plainly, the truth both had skirted around. His throat tightened, his eyes stung. For a moment he had no answer. At last he breathed deep and took her small hand. "You're right, Mom has gone. But don't you see, we still have the string. Her love and my love always keep you here. Just like the string keeps the kite. No matter how high it flies, it's still tied to us." Emily looked up, tears glistening, but her gaze held a new brightness. Thomas straightened the kite again, this time holding the string himself. He jogged forward. The wind caught, and the kite soared upward. "Look," he shouted, a ripple of joy in his voice. Emily's eyes widened, following it. He turned back, extending the line. "Take it." Emily hesitated, then reached out. At that moment, Thomas stumbled on a stone and fell, dropping the spool right in front of her. Instinctively, she grabbed it, clenching tight. And to her surprise, the kite didn't fall. It climbed higher, billowing in the wind. She stared, trembling hands holding the string. Her heart thumped wildly, not with fear this time, but with the rush of a small victory. "You did it!" Thomas shouted, beaming from the ground. Emily's smile flashed quick as lightning, but enough for Thomas to see enough to stir hope in his chest. The kite lasted only a few more minutes before the breeze slackened and it sank down. Emily let the string slip from her hands, unwilling to carry the weight as it dropped. Thomas ran over, pulling her into a hug. "It's okay. It flew. And you were the one who kept it there." Emily tilted her face to the blue sky where the kite had been. Her smile faded, but not from sadness. Something had shifted inside her, a crack in the wall of fear, letting a shard of light through. On the walk home, Thomas carried the kite on his shoulder. Emily walked beside him in silence, sometimes nudging a pebble, sometimes smiling faintly. He didn't press her with questions. He knew what mattered wasn't how long the kite stayed aloft, but that his daughter had dared to hold the string. As they turned onto their familiar street, the wind followed at their backs, gentle but steady. Thomas looked at her small hand clutching her teddy and silently told himself, Today we took a step, and there will be more. In their shared silence, both heard the same thing, the wind no longer frightening, but like a quiet melody lifting an invisible kite inside their hearts. In the days after the first kite outing, Thomas tried to make it a habit every evening after work. He took Emily to the field, sometimes only for 15 minutes, sometimes nearly an hour. But each time he patiently held the string, offered it to her, and stood behind like a protective shadow. At first, Emily was reluctant. She often sat on the grass clutching her teddy, watching the kite for a moment, before turning away. Thomas never scolded, only smiled, running more laps with the kite so the wind would keep it aloft longer. He wanted her to see that the sky was not just a place that carried things away, but also one that returned hope. On the third outing, Thomas handed her the spool. "Hold tight, keep steady. When the wind comes, just step back a little." Emily tried, but within seconds the kite wobbled and crashed. She gasped, threw down the string, tears spilling. "I told you it doesn't listen to me. I'll never get it." Thomas bent, lifting the kite, brushing off grass. He placed his hand on her shoulder. "It didn't fall because you failed. It fell because the wind shifted. You have to try many times before you learn how to follow the wind." Emily shook her head, turning away, hiding her face in the teddy. Her small body trembled. Thomas froze. He knew her fear wasn't just about the kite falling. She feared proving that everything she touched disappeared just like her mother. That night, after Emily had gone to bed, Thomas sat in the living room with the kite across his lap. He stared at the small tears along its paper edges, the spots where glue had lifted. A heaviness pressed down. Was he forcing his daughter to face her fear too soon? Was he repeating his old mistake, trying to fix everything, only to wound her more? He remembered that last day in the hospital. His wife's hand in his breath, fading eyes steady. "Don't leave her alone, Thomas. No matter how hard it is, you must find a way to bring her back into the light." The words echoed, making him clutch the kite tighter. He knew he had no right to give up. The next day, clouds hung low, the wind shifting in bursts, strong then still. As always, Thomas and Emily went to the field. This time he decided she should hold the string from the start. Emily hesitated, but accepted. Thomas jogged a few steps and released the kite. The wind caught. It swayed dangerously. "Pull gently, then let it out slowly," he called. Emily tried, but the gust shifted and the kite plunged. Thomas dashed forward, but slipped on damp ground and fell, scraping his hand. In that instant, the spool slipped free and landed right before Emily. Startled, she instinctively snatched it up, and unexpectedly, the wind turned. The kite swelled and shot upward. Emily stood frozen, her whole body taut, her small hands gripping the trembling string. From the ground, Thomas looked up, aching but laughing. "See, you're the one flying it." Emily's eyes widened. For the first time, she felt the line carry strength, fragile, yet real. Her heart pounded no longer with fear, but with a strange exhilaration. The kite danced high for a few minutes before the breeze weakened. Emily struggled to hold it, but at last it drifted down. She let go, panting, both tired and awed. Thomas came to her, kneeling so their eyes met. "You see, it flew because of you, not me. You made it happen." Emily bit her lip, a spark of light in her gaze. Then quickly she looked down, hiding the smile that had just bloomed. Thomas didn't press. He only picked up the kite, dusted it off, and whispered, "Tomorrow we'll try again." Emily nodded, just a tiny nod. On the way home, the wind brushed softly through her hair. She held her teddy in her left hand, but her right still carried the rough, burning, but honest feel of the string. And in her heart, a small thought slipped in. Maybe not everything flew away forever. Maybe some things stayed if you held on tightly enough. Thomas glanced at her and saw the faintest smile. Fragile as the string had been ready to snap at any moment, but to him it was a miracle. He lightly held her hand, saying nothing. The sky was graying, but in both their hearts a new light flickered. One October afternoon, the sky shimmered orange sunlight, dipping behind the row of houses in the distance. Thomas sat in the garage, the blue kite with pink trim before him, its edges frayed from so many attempts. Torn paper, worn string. He knew it was time to make another. He laid a new bamboo frame on the table, spreading sheets of colored paper. One pale pink sheet glowed brighter than the rest. He froze. That color recalled the summer dress his wife used to wear during a picnic at the meadow 2 years earlier. Emily had been 6 then, laughing as she ran circles around her mother, waving a pink hair clip in the air. The memory squeezed his chest, but also sparked an idea. "Emily," he called, noticing her in the doorway. "Want to choose the color for the new kite?" She stepped in, eyes curious but careful. Looking over the papers, she slowly pointed to the pink one. "I want this." Thomas nodded, hiding the tremor in his heart. "All right. Then this will be your kite." For the first time since her mother's death, Emily sat beside him to make something together. She held the scissors, cutting along the edges, sometimes crooked, forcing Thomas to fix the slips. But he didn't correct her, only smiled. "Perfect. Every kite carries the fingerprints of its maker." While tying the line, Emily looked up. "Did Mom ever fly a kite, Dad?" Thomas paused, eyes distant. "Yes. Back in college, she told me she loved watching kites. She said kites were like dreams, fragile but beautiful, and as long as they had a string of love holding them, they'd never get lost." Emily was quiet, then smiled faintly. "I want my kite to be like a dream, too." Thomas blinked against the blur in his eyes, bowing his head to tie the knot, hiding the swell of emotion. That evening, after dinner, Thomas pulled an old photo album from the shelf. He spread it on the table and sat with Emily. They turned the pages together, his wife laughing in the kitchen, cradling newborn Emily. Trips to the beach, Christmas mornings around their small tree. Emily touched the photo of her mother in the pink dress standing on the meadow. She whispered, "I miss Mom." Thomas slipped an arm around her shoulders. "So do I, but see, she's still here in every picture, in every memory. And in you." Emily looked up, her eyes brighter than usual. "I dreamed of her a few times. She was smiling, waving at me. Then I woke up and felt empty." Thomas swallowed hard, answering gently, "That's not just a dream. That's her way of reminding you her love never left." Emily rubbed her eyes and leaned her head against his shoulder. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to rest on someone. That weekend, Thomas and Emily carried the new pink kite to the meadow. The wind was strong clouds, racing sunlight slanting. Thomas helped her raise the kite. Emily gripped the spool, took a deep breath. At his call, "Run," she sprinted, small feet pounding the grass, hair flying. The pink kite caught the wind and soared, circling high. Emily laughed, a full, ringing laugh that carried with the breeze. "Look, Dad. It's really flying." Thomas ran alongside, his heart swelling. He hadn't seen her radiant like this since her mother passed. He knew the kite wasn't just flying in the sky. It was rising inside his daughter, inside their family's memory. When the kite finally descended, Emily clutched it, breathless but glowing. "Dad, I want to make more kites. A blue one, a yellow one. Then we'll have a whole sky of them. Thomas laughed, pulling her into his arms. We will. As many as you want. In that moment, he felt the cold wall between them begin to crack. The fractures were no longer frightening, because through them light and wind seeped in. On the walk home, Emily whispered, Dad, Mom would love today's kite, wouldn't she? Thomas squeezed her hand. Yes, and I'm sure she saw it, from up above. The wind swept through the trees, carrying the scent of fresh grass and old memories. Thomas lifted his gaze to the twilight sky, silently promising. He would keep her kites aloft so that every step his daughter took would be carried by the wind. One weekend afternoon, the meadow stretched wide under golden sunlight. The wind carried the scent of damp earth and wildflowers sweeping through the oaks until their leaves rustled like nature's applause. Thomas and Emily came again with the kite. The pink kite, the one they had made together with memory and love, was coiled carefully in Thomas's hand. Emily held his hand, her small palm cool but no longer trembling as it had before. She no longer clutched her teddy, but walked beside him with a quiet air of expectation. Are you ready? Thomas asked gently. Emily nodded, her eyes bright with anticipation. Thomas passed the kite to her, then stepped back, guiding softly. When the wind comes, run forward a little and let the string out slowly. She drew a deep breath, then ran. Her small feet pressed into the soft grass, her hair streaming in the wind. The pink kite wavered at first, then the wind caught it, lifting it higher. Emily tugged on the line, and this time the kite flew steadier than ever before. She looked up, her mouth open in astonishment. Suddenly, a sound burst out, a laugh, pure and clear, echoing across the field. It was the laugh Thomas had longed to hear again. Not forced, not cautious. It rang free from the shell of gloom spreading out and dissolving the silence that had weighed on their home. Thomas stood frozen. He watched his daughter's cheeks flushed from the wind, her smile brighter than sunlight itself. Warm tears welled and spilled down his face. He didn't wipe them away. He let them flow, marking this moment as something to keep forever. Dad. I did it, Emily shouted. Her eyes locked on the kite circling above. Thomas ran to her, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. Yes, you did. Do you see, it flies high because you trusted the wind and trusted yourself? Emily laughed again, breathless but joyous. She pulled the string, guiding the kite to swirl and loop. Each turn painted bright strokes across the blue sky, replacing the empty patches in her heart with something vibrant. When the kite finally drifted down, Emily was still smiling. She ran to her father and hugged him tightly. Dad, I love flying kites. It makes me feel light, like someone is holding me from above. Thomas embraced her. That's your mother, Emily. Don't you feel it? Today, the wind is like her arms around you. Emily nodded, eyes glistening. But this time her tears fell with a smile still on her lips. It was a strange mixture, grief and joy, loss and rediscovery. On the way home, Emily walked with a gentle whistle, the habit she once had when she was carefree. Thomas listened, his heart overflowing with gratitude. He knew it wasn't only the kite that had flown, but his daughter's smile that had returned. In that moment, he whispered a vow: from now on, no matter how the wind shifted, he would hold this string tight so Emily's smile would never be lost again. On a Thursday morning in early June, Thomas had just finished an early shift and stopped by the small grocery in town. As he stepped out, a colorful poster caught his eye: Summer Festival. Traditional kite flying contest, Sunday, town meadow. The image of bright kites soaring into the blue sky made him pause. It had been years since he even thought about the festival. Once it was the highlight of every summer, the place where families gathered with picnic blankets laughing as their kites danced above. For a moment, he thought he heard his wife's laughter echo the sound he hadn't heard in nearly a year. He clutched his grocery bag and hurried home, his heart rising with a mixture of excitement and unease. That evening, as they ate dinner, Emily quietly shaped her macaroni into circles on her plate. Thomas pulled the folded poster from his pocket and set it on the table. "Look at this," he said softly. "This weekend, the town is having a festival. There's even a kite flying contest." Emily looked up, her eyes flickering with sudden light. She studied the poster where a pink kite curved against the sky. "Do they let kids join too?" "Of course. Anyone can." "What do you think?" Emily bit her lip. The spark in her eyes wavered, shrinking like a candle in the wind. "I don't know. I'm scared my kite will fall in front of everyone. I'd be so embarrassed." Thomas pressed his lips together. He knew that fear well, the weight of eyes watching, the dread of failing in public. He was just as afraid, perhaps more. If Emily faltered, would she close herself off again, erasing all the progress they had made that night? Thomas lay restless. He sat in the dim living room, the desk lamp casting light across the poster. He remembered his wife urging him back when she was alive. "Take her out, Thomas. Let her see the world is bigger than this house." If she were here, she'd surely encourage Emily to join. But he was different. He was afraid. Afraid of seeing disappointment in his daughter's eyes. Afraid he wouldn't find words to comfort her. Afraid that everything they had built could unravel in a single afternoon of fickle wind. He crumpled the poster in his hand, then smoothed it flat again, his gaze torn. The next morning, as Thomas prepared to leave for work, Emily stepped out, the pink kite clutched in her arms. "Dad," she said hesitantly, "if we join, Mom will see us, won't she?" Thomas froze. Her eyes brimmed with pure hope, the same look she'd had years ago, holding up her first tied shoelace and asking if it was right. He knew that his answer now would shape the fragile belief inside her. He knelt, laying a hand on her shoulder. "Yes, she'll see, and she'll be proud no matter how high the kite flies." Emily smiled, a blend of nervousness and hope. Then, "Let's join Dad." Thomas swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, we'll join." For the next 2 days, the garage became their little workshop. Thomas brought home more colored paper, nylon string, and tape. Emily busied herself drawing stars and hearts across the kite's surface. "Do you think this one will fly higher than the old one?" she asked eagerly. "Of course," Thomas said, eyes warm. "Because this time you've put your dreams into it." Even as he spoke, a shadow of worry lingered inside him. That evening they tested it in the backyard. The new kite flew unsteady, crashing often. Emily frowned, but every time it fell, Thomas reassured her. "It's okay. A kite falls only so we learn to hold it better." Strangely, she didn't give up. On Saturday night, the eve of the festival, Thomas tidied the garage. Emily ran in, hugging the kite tightly. "Dad, tomorrow. If I drop it, will you be really sad?" Thomas paused, then sat at her level. He smoothed her brown hair and said, "I'll never be sad because you tried. I'd only be sad if you didn't dare to fly. You see, what matters isn't whether your kite goes higher than anyone else's. It's that you're brave enough to hold the string." Emily looked at him and smiled, a shy but steady smile. "Then tomorrow I'll do it. Even if it falls, I'll still try." Thomas's throat tightened. He pulled her close silently, thanking the wind for carrying this fragile seed of faith into her heart. That night, after Emily slept, Thomas stood on the porch in the cool night breeze. He looked up at the starry sky, the spool of their new kite firm in his hand. Inside, he whispered, "My love tomorrow. I'll stand beside her. I won't let her face it alone. Whether the kite falls or soars, whether she cries or laughs, I'll hold the string that ties us together. I promise." The night wind rustled the trees in reply. Thomas drew in a deep breath, feeling a different strength rise within him, the strength of a father ready to face the sky with his daughter. On Sunday morning, the town meadow bloomed like a giant painting. Families gathered picnic blankets, spread baskets of fruit, opened children's voices chattering everywhere. Hundreds of kites of all shapes and colors were prepared, a dragon kite stretching dozens of meters, a shimmering blue dolphin, traditional triangle kites, even one shaped like a superhero. The sky slowly filled with a festive excitement, ready for the day's celebration. Thomas and Emily stepped into the competition area carrying the pink kite they had made together. Emily clutched it tightly to her chest, eyes wandering across the crowd, torn between curiosity and fear. The loudspeaker boomed, "Welcome to the town's annual kite flying contest. Families, please get ready." Emily froze. Nearby, a group of children her age laughed loudly, showing off the giant kites their parents had carefully crafted. A boy glanced at her and scoffed. "That little pink kite will never fly high." The careless words pricked like needles into Emily's heart. She dropped her gaze, her hands clutching the string, until her knuckles turned white. Doubt flooded in. "Dad, I'm not sure anymore." "I'm afraid they'll laugh at me." Thomas bent down, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Emily, remember, what matters isn't how high the kite flies. It's that you dare to hold the string. Whether they laugh or not, that's their choice. All we need is to believe in ourselves." Emily looked up, her eyes brimming. She gave a small nod, though her hands still trembled. The announcer called each family in turn. With every kite soaring upward, cheers and claps erupted. Emily grew more tense, her heart racing. She held the kite tighter, whispering, "What if it falls?" Thomas leaned close, whispering back, "If it falls, we'll lift it again. You're not alone." When their turn came, Emily stepped onto the wide grass. Dozens of eyes turned toward her. The weight of their gaze made her want to run, but her father's warm hand held hers firm, keeping her steady. Thomas lifted the pink kite and called out. "Ready?" Emily nodded, shakily, took a deep breath, and gripped the string. Thomas ran forward and released the kite. At first it rose beautifully, stretching tall into the air, and Emily's eyes widened with hope. But then the wind shifted. Thin, dark clouds drifted in gusts, tearing, swirling. The kite lost balance, jerking wildly. The crowd gasped, some children giggling. Panic surged in Emily. She pulled the string too hard, and the kite plunged downward. "No. It's going to fall," she cried, tears welling in her eyes. In that instant, memories crashed back, the moment her mother slipped away, the helplessness of not being able to hold on to what mattered most. Sobs broke free. She wanted to let go, to end it all. But then Thomas's strong hand covered hers. He gripped firmly, his voice rising above the wind. "You're not alone. I'm here." Emily looked up into her father's steady, believing eyes. That gaze became another string stronger than the one in her hand, anchoring her to the ground. "Listen to me," he urged. "Loosen a little, then pull gently. Don't be afraid. Let the wind carry it." Choking back tears, Emily nodded. Together, father and daughter worked in rhythm, her small hands within his larger ones tugging in unison. The kite wavered, then caught the wind, slowly steadying. Inch by inch it rose again, climbing higher. The crowd began to clap. Cheers spread across the meadow. Emily gasped, stunned laughter and tears mingling. "Dad, it's flying again." "Did it?" Thomas squeezed her hand. "No, we did it." The pink kite circled against the sky, standing out among hundreds of others. Emily broke down crying, but this time it was not from fear. It was the release of something heavy she had carried too long. The audience applauded as their turn ended. Emily hugged her father tightly, burying her face in his chest. "Dad, I thought it would fall forever, but it didn't. It stayed." Thomas held her close, his own eyes wet. "Just like your mother's sweetheart. Love never falls away. It only soars higher." As they left the meadow, Emily still clutched the rolled-up string as if it were a treasure. On her lips bloomed a smile, both innocent and steadfast, the kind of smile Thomas knew would linger for a long time. The wind brushed through their hair. No longer an enemy, the wind had become their companion, reminding them that sometimes all it takes is to hold on and believe, and every kite will find its sky again. The loudspeaker blared, announcing the final round of the contest. The meadow burst into noise, laughter, and chatter, mingling with the rush of wind. Giant kites soared one by one, showing off the strength and skill of seasoned flyers. Children cheered, adults clapped, and the air buzzed so much that Thomas felt Emily shrink beside him. She hugged the spool to her chest, eyes fixed on the dazzling kites wheeling above. To her, they looked like giant birds she could never hope to match. Nervousness chilled her small hands. "Dad, if ours falls again, everyone will laugh," she whispered, her voice trembling close to tears. Thomas knelt, placing both hands firmly on her shoulders. "Emily, remember what you did earlier. You held on and brought it back even when the wind turned. You did it because you didn't let go. And this time I'll be right here holding on with you." When their turn came, Thomas and Emily stepped into the open grass. The wind pressed strong, bending the blades low. Thomas lifted the pink kite, signaling his daughter to get ready. "You don't have to do this alone. My hand will always be next to yours," he said firmly. Emily drew a deep breath and nodded. As Thomas launched the kite, she released the string in rhythm with his guidance. The wind surged. The kite wobbled at first, but Thomas's large hand wrapped over her small one, steadying the pull. "See, just gentle. Let the wind do the rest," he murmured. Emily lifted her eyes. Tension eased as she saw the kite rise, circling steadily instead of falling. Then a sudden gust slammed through, jerking the string so hard the kite nearly dove. Emily cried out in panic, "Dad!" Thomas tightened his grip, his voice cutting through the roar. "It's okay. Hold my hand. Together. Do you hear?" Their hands clasped tighter. He coached her, "Pull a little. Now release. Good. Now pull again." Emily followed, clumsy at first, but with his warm hand guiding, she found the rhythm. The kite swooped once, then caught the wind, steadied, and soared higher. The crowd erupted in cheers. Emily's eyes widened, astonished. Then she burst into laughter. That laughter, pure, radiant, triumphant, struck Thomas so deeply he could hardly breathe. For the next few minutes, father and daughter moved in harmony. Thomas no longer needed to say much. Emily had begun to feel the wind, to know when to let go, when to hold. She shouted with joy. Dad, I'm doing it. I really am. Thomas gazed at her pride swelling in his chest. Yes, sweetheart, you are. And I'm prouder of you than of anything else. Tears spilled from Emily's eyes, but they weren't born of sorrow. They were tears of release like the first summer rain cleansing the sky. When the time ended, Emily clutched the spool, panting, her face glowing. She turned and flung her arms around her father. Dad, thank you. If you weren't here, I would have let go. Thomas held her tight, his voice low and warm. No, Emily. You're the one who kept it flying. My hand was only there to remind you you're never alone. Emily buried her face into his shoulder, soaking in his steady embrace. For the first time since her mother's passing, she felt safe. As they walked back to their seats, the pink kite still hovered above, a living proof of their triumph. The crowd murmured admiration, many eyes turning toward them. Emily paid no mind to the praise. She lifted her gaze skyward, whispering, Mom must have seen it right. Dad, Thomas nodded, voice thick. Yes, she saw. And she's smiling just like you are now. Emily smiled, pure and unshadowed at last. Evening fell, painting the meadow gold. Against the flaming orange sky, the pink kite shone like a reminder that hope never fades. Thomas held his daughter's hand silently, promising, This string doesn't just hold the kite. It holds you and me together. And as long as we never let go, nothing can part us. In that warm embrace, Emily knew that the road ahead, no matter how many headwinds, would never bring her down again. The afternoon of the festival slowly drew to a close. Families began packing up, the laughter and shouts of children fading away. The vast meadow was left with only a few lingering souls. But in the sky, Emily's pink kite still soared, small yet proud, dancing beneath the golden light of day's end. Thomas and Emily lay on a thin blanket spread across the grass. Neither hurried home, as if both wished to hold on to this rare moment just a little longer. Emily lay on her back, hands folded beneath her head, eyes fixed on the kite. Her brown hair spilled over the grass, a few strands glinting in the sun. Thomas lay beside her in silence, listening to the wind brushing through the grass and the faint rustle of the kite above. After so many bleak months, he felt peace for the first time. Not the hollow quiet of mourning, but true peace, a place where sorrow and joy could exist together, not canceling each other out, but blending like the sky tinged with gold and violet as dusk descended. Dad. Emily's voice was soft. Yes, sweetheart. I think Mom is watching us from up there. Thomas turned and saw her eyes glowing and clear, no longer shadowed. He swallowed hard, smiled. I think so too, and I'm sure she's very proud. The wind shifted gently, filling the kite, lifting it higher. Emily sat up suddenly, clutching the string. See, Dad? It's like it wants to reach her. Thomas sat up, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Maybe it does. But you know what's important. You're holding the string. No matter how far it flies, it's still connected to you. Emily's eyes widened. Just like Mom. She may be far away, but she's still connected to me by love, right? Thomas squeezed her shoulder, his voice warm and steady. Exactly. Love is like this string. Invisible, but it never breaks. They sat in silence for a long while. The sky deepened into crimson, the sun a great ember melting into the horizon. Thomas closed his eyes, memories flooding back an evening years ago, he and his wife lying on this very meadow, hand in hand, dreaming of the future. They had promised to bring Emily here every summer. That promise was left unfinished, yet today he felt her presence woven into the wind, into his daughter's laughter. He opened his eyes and turned to Emily. She was giggling at the kite's playful loops, her smile so much like her mother's that it squeezed his heart. But this time the ache didn't drown him. It mingled with happiness, like the salt of tears blending with the sweetness of sunset. Dad. Emily whispered, "What if one day I grow up and have to leave you, Will? The strings still hold?" Thomas froze. Her question pierced like a blade, yet it was also a lesson. He placed his hand over hers, giving a gentle squeeze. "The string of love, Emily, will follow you wherever you go. You can fly high, fly far, but I'll always be here holding the other end." Emily smiled, eyes shimmering with tears. "Then I'll fly, but I'll never be afraid of getting lost." Thomas bent down, kissed her hair, and whispered, "That's right. And I promise I'll always hold on." They stayed until the sun nearly vanished. The light flickered across the kite, making it glow like a small flame burning in the vast sky. As the breeze softened, Emily slowly reeled it in. She hugged the kite to her chest, whispering, "Thank you, Dad. And thank you, Mom, too." Thomas rose, taking her hand, and together they walked down the narrow path. The meadow receded behind them, but in their hearts the kite still soared. On the way home, Emily chattered happily, recounting every loop and turn, as though each were a triumph. Thomas listened, nodding now and then, his heart lighter. He knew grief would never vanish completely, but now it had made space for healing. The sunset closed the day, yet opened a new beginning, and in the hearts of father and daughter lived a quiet, enduring faith. Whenever the wind blew, whenever they held the string, her mother and love would always be there, unseen but everlasting. The next morning, the town meadow was quiet. The festival had ended, the colorful flags taken down, leaving only a few ribbons scattered in the breeze. But Thomas and Emily returned, carrying the pink kite. No more cheers, no more crowd, just father, daughter, and the vast sky waiting for them. Thomas set the bag down and drew a deep breath. The air was fresh, scented with dew and young grass. Emily ran a few steps ahead, kite in hand, her hair flying. Her smile was radiant, so different from that first day he brought her here, when she only hid behind him, trembling, afraid of the sky itself. "Dad, can I do it all by myself today?" Emily asked, eyes shining. Thomas nodded, pride swelling in his chest. "Yes, I'll be right here, but this time the kite will be all yours." Emily lifted the kite high, facing the wind. Her small hands gripped the string tightly. She took a breath, then ran. The pink kite swelled, dipped once, then climbed straight upward, steady and strong. Thomas stood back, watching. No longer did his hands need to guide her. Emily had learned how to listen to the wind, when to release, when to pull. She laughed, a bright, ringing laugh that carried far light as chimes in the breeze. "Look, Dad. It's flying so high," Emily shouted, eyes gleaming. Thomas shaded his eyes, following the kite as it soared into the blue. In that moment, he saw not just a kite rising, but his daughter's heart as well, free, strong, no longer weighed down by fear. Emily turned, holding the spool high. "Dad, I won't let go, I promise." Thomas walked closer, kneeling to meet her gaze. "You know there will be times in life when you'll want to let go because you're scared or tired. But if you remember that the string of love always ties you to family, you'll find the strength to hold on." Emily's eyes glistened. "Then what's your promise to me, Dad?" Thomas placed his warm hand over hers, his voice firm. "I promise I'll always hold the other end. No matter how high, no matter how far you fly, I'll be here waiting when you look back." Tears spilled down Emily's cheeks, but she smiled. "Then I'll fly high so Mom can see too." The wind suddenly surged, lifting the pink kite higher, until it was just a speck against the endless sky. Emily gazed upward, her mouth open in awe and joy. Thomas stood beside her, a hand on her shoulder, watching with her. In the morning light, the tiny, proud kite became a symbol of everything: their loss, their patience, their faith, and the invisible love that bound them together. They sat in the grass, letting the kite drift high above. Emily whispered, "I'm not afraid anymore, Dad. I know Mom is still here in the wind, in the sunlight, and in my heart." Thomas wrapped his arms around her, his eyes blurring. "That's right. And from today on, you can let fear fly away, keep only love." They sat quietly, letting the wind carry all the unspoken words. And in that silence, both felt a presence gentle, warm, as if his wife were sitting beside them, smiling at father and daughter. When the sun rose higher, Emily slowly reeled the kite back down. She hugged it close, her eyes still bright. "Dad, next time let's make another one. I want the whole sky full of kites." Thomas laughed, ruffling her hair. "We'll make as many as you like." They stood hand in hand, leaving the meadow. Behind them, the grass still bore the trail of small and large footprints side by side, moving forward together. On the way back, Thomas glanced at the sky where the kite had flown. Inside him, a silent vow stirred. "I will never let go of this string, just as I will never let go of you. And from today, no matter how many headwinds, we will fly high together." Emily squeezed his hand, smiling in peace. Sunlight poured over them like a warm summer blanket. And in that wide sky of that year, a kite still soared, like memory, like promise, like love that never fades.